And that's another reason why they might be abducting people, too, just to find out what makes us tick.
Some of that is true, definitely. I can say that for the most part, the beings in this case that I've dealt with are benevolent and have been kind to me. I went up astrally. I wasn't taken physically or really against my will, as far as I recall, and there was a lot that I'm just beginning to remember, really, that I agreed to or said because I was in that kind of 5D astral state when I was off planet. But specifically the mantis beings, I recall, and have even since experienced them more and more, being highly loving, caring, compassionate beings who really don't want to hurt anyone. They're very concerned for my well-being and everyone else's. Now, the thing about the Greys is strange because, as I said before, within every species, every being is not the same. There's, like, every soul has its own personality, and there are also groups that could be more malevolent or benevolent than others. Now, sometimes the Greys come off as being mean or harsh or cold-blooded, and sometimes they come off as being, sometimes the same ones even come off as being highly loving and compassionate and caring. It's kind of weird. I guess there are different species, so we might not even be able to fully understand why that is, but
I don't know.
I've heard one perspective that could actually be a sense of humor. They could be fairly caring for us and kind to us and don't want to hurt us, really, but sometimes they could even get a bit of humor and entertainment and enjoyment out of watching us suffer just a little bit.
Well, I got to say something.
Now,
I got to say, Troy, you got to let me talk here in between too, okay? But I'm going to say this. Mm-hmm. One of my guests wrote a book about owls. Now, he is a game warden. And, during our interview, we were talking about, aliens and stuff like that. Well, one night he was in his bedroom, and he was just about ready to go to bed. He didn't have his curtains drawn because he lived in an area that he didn't have to worry about peeping Toms. All of a sudden, he swears he saw a group, like 3 or 4 Greys, walking right, towards him and coming into his, bedroom. And he swears he was awake. And then all of a sudden, he didn't remember anything at all. Then all of a sudden, being a game warden, all of a sudden he started seeing owls like mad. I mean, every time he would go out, there would be groups of owls around him, and which was highly unusual. But he wrote a book on it, and he didn't associate till we talked. Those owls could have been implanted in his mind because, being a game warden, they came in and read his mind, right? And maybe the guy had infatuation with owls, right? So every time he would go out and when he would see a group of owls, which was kind of weird in the first place, I explained to him, I said, they might not be owls. Those could be, the Greys, that when you see the Greys, they now implanted in your mind that you don't see them, you see the owls. And that kind of, really kind of shook the guy up. So I do think they have those type of capabilities to not brainwash you, but put things into your mind. Naturally, they must, because a lot of people have been abducted, only remember little bits and pieces, or they don't know anything at all, the loss of time. And then there's certain people, that do remember. Now, I don't know if you were astral taken up. You could have been, in bed, sound asleep, and all of a sudden they decided, to take you on board a UFO. Now, I got to ask you a question. Did this happen before you went to the mountain, or did it start happening after the mountain?
The astral?
Right, the visits.
Yeah, the trip to Mt.Adams was my first real anomalous missing time and seeming alien abduction case. Now, I don't call it abduction. I prefer to use the word contact, but I was the team member. I think there may have been one more or one other team member who went up astrally. However, I only remember Michael W. Hall with me off planet clearly right now. And I've had at least one other contact since the Mt.Adams incident that was definitely astral. Because one morning I had much earlier before I would usually wake up, I sat up in my bed, looked around at my bedroom and had the thought that I had just come back from somewhere. Then I went back to sleep, and it was a number of hours later that I actually woke up and remembered that. So then it was a couple of days later that I chose to tune in and chose to remember what happened. And again, that was astral. It's not something I can really control. I'm not able at this point to walk out of my body astrally for astral projection like some people can, but
well, Troy,
all of my
Troy, how do you know this is astral? How do you know that when you're not in bed, you're actually being abducted? Yeah, I mean, they're transporting your body, you know. I mean, again, the missing time at the campsite, all this stuff. I mean, you know, like with me, with my trip through the desert, you know, I didn't realize it here too recently, you know, that piece of metal in my back. You know, I was standing outside, but then, you know, the car, how do I know I wasn't abducted? Time stood still. They put me back and, you know, I continued on. Same with my ex-wife at the time. I mean, it sounds like this all started from after the mountain. So maybe, have you talked to any of the other UFO I Team members? Is anybody else experiencing this same type of thing?
I have been in contact with the team regularly, and as far as I know, nobody else has been. Well, actually, I suspect, or it's apparent that Michael has been contacted since. So the way we figured, or the way that seems to be, is that he has this big watch that he wears, and it's one of the watches that has those glow-in-the-dark dots and spots in it. So he's found that it goes dark after about half an hour not being exposed to light. So this happened also in the Mt.Adams incident. It wasn't just the CPAP machine that recorded the 315, but he woke up and noticed that at the time his watch was glowing brightly, which was odd because that suggests that maybe he might have even been taken before 315, maybe even again after, we're not sure, or somehow he was exposed to extremely bright light.
We had to, because his watch,
during his sleep.
Yeah, that watch, I know what type of watch it is. Phosphorus paint, okay? It absorbs the light. Like if you go in and hold it up to a light bulb, it charges it, and about 20, 30 minutes later, it starts getting dimmer, and then it goes out. So, you know, being dark for a long period of time, and all of a sudden you wake up and it's bright, he had to be, you know, not an astral. He had to have been abducted then, or something had to go on, or whatever happened with that car, it got magnetized like you're talking about. Something strange happened. And now you're telling me you started having these astral experiences since then. I really think what you need to do, okay, and it doesn't cost much, or if you got a laptop there, record yourself as you're sleeping at night for a week or two or three. I don't know how often this happens to you, but it doesn't cost you anything. Record yourself sleeping at night. And then, periodically go through it and speed through it and see all of a sudden if you're not in your bed for a little while. Or if all of a sudden that night you're recording it, it goes blank for no reason for a period of time, or the recording is deleted for some reason.
I'll probably start doing that just to see what happens anyway. I've been meaning to, but I haven't gotten around to that. One quick thing I wanted to touch on is that Michael recently had another incident of waking up in the middle of the night, and his watch was again glowing brightly hours after he went to bed. So that indicates that again, after the Mt.Adams incident, he was contacted or exposed to bright light. I think he was contacted, and I think there's a certain relationship that each person has with the ETs, or certain groups you can develop a relationship with. Mine, I can get into why I think this is, but mine, I am convinced, is astral so far, at least with the direct contact. Michael's, for some reason, is physical. I think they're monitoring him, monitoring me. They've been, I think, aware of me for years. I've had dreams over a number of years of, I don't remember details specifically, but just dreams of Greys and benevolent ETs, but not being off-planet, just dreams of them. There is a definite difference between how I feel with my memories that have been in my body awake, or astral, or dreaming. I think the astral and dreaming is kind of similar in the feeling of the memories. They come through clearly, a lot of the memories, but it's just a different tone to it, kind of a different knowingness, whether I'm in my body or awake. Now, I haven't had any bruises or marks on my body. I've been checking that. I haven't had anything show up on my body anomalous. Now, Michael did. He talked about this live during one of our meetings, or multiple meetings actually. And shortly after Tucklock Lake, shortly after he left the campground, he noticed that he had 3 little dots on his left wrist. And he took a picture of it. Those 3 little dots just happened to, he noticed them anyway after he left the lake. I think it was from the Mt.Adams incident that those dots showed up. And what's interesting is that all 3 of those dots is where hair follicles are, but they're definitely some sort of puncture marks, like needles touched his skin or went into his skin. It's not red, but just like, looks like little puncture marks. They're probably gone by now, but he took a picture of it. And since then, I've learned that he actually has nanites in him, which I believe to be enhancement nanites, not controlling or monitoring nanites, but just nanites to help his physical condition. And I think he's had accelerated healing. He might be able to comment on this differently, but I'm pretty sure he's had accelerated healing since his recent surgery. Even before that, he noticed a slight improvement in some of his health before his recent surgery.
Oh, yeah.
That he had to go in for. So there's that.
Well, I want you to do one thing for me, okay? Because I'm going to have you back on here at the end of the month for about a half an hour.
Okay.
I do want you, not every night, but just start recording yourself sleeping. I mean, and just see if anything strange happens, because, again, like I stress, like when I saw that thing, I don't know any way I could have a piece of metal in me.